learning unit will cover a wealth of information regarding working with military students and teaching on military bases. After completing this learning unit, you will be able to identify challenges unique to military students that can affect their class performance. You will also be able to describe the protocol for teaching on a military installation. In addition, you'll be able to list general questions to ask when teaching on an installation. Finally, you'll be able to locate university policies for teaching in a military setting. There are important elements to be aware of as you teach military students and teach on a military installation. This learning unit will identify the common situations and issues you may encounter as an instructor, regardless of what modality you teach in. Whether you are teaching online, at a campus, or on Eagle Vision, you will most likely be teaching military students. In this section, we'll talk about how to best help your military students succeed in your course. We'll cover important topics such as military deployment and workload, what required documentation you can request, how a military student's rank may affect his or her behavior, possible internet connectivity issues that your active military student may deal with, as well as the unique challenges veteran military students may face and how to help them. Deployment is a part of military life. Most deployments take months of preparation, so students should know well in advance if they are going to be deployed. In these cases, they will be advised accordingly regarding their course load by their academic advisor. However, in some rare cases, there are short-notice deployments for those who are in a Special Forces unit or are serving as attachés. When these short-notice or no-notice deployments arise, you should address them based on the student's current progress in the course. Those type of deployments are usually very short in length and most times will not affect much more than a possible conflicted class meeting. In all of these cases, specific orders detailing the deployment will be made available to the student. It is perfectly acceptable for a professor to require that documentation to be provided before allowing any exceptions to his or her grading or attendance policy. If a student has a short notice or no notice deployment and will be missing multiple classes or will no longer be able to attend your class, you and the student should generally follow these recommendations. During the first week of the course, the student should be advised to contact their campus immediately for a course drop. From the second week to midpoint of the course, the student should be advised to speak to their academic advisor regarding a course withdrawal. For more information regarding the midpoint of the course, feel free to refer to the academic calendar. After the midpoint of the course, if the student will miss too many sessions to successfully complete the course, or the student's current progress in the class is below standards, instruct the student to contact his or her advisor to discuss a late withdrawal. A late withdrawal has no negative impact on the student's academic status. A late withdrawal approval requires third-party documentation and is approved on a case-by-case basis. A no-notice deployment with the correct documentation would fall under a normally approved late withdrawal request. After the midpoint of the course, if you and the student have determined a successful completion of the course is possible, you can opt to work with the student. It is imperative the student's progress and current course participation warrants this decision. The student may have access to internet during his or her deployment. The student's remaining course completion could be a project or research paper. Additional work can be considered to make up for class participation. Clearly document what remaining task or work you expect from the student and the realistic timeline you have set. If the deadline extends beyond the course end date, you may consider assigning the student an I grade with a clear end date. The student should adhere to the newly assigned timeline with a clear, documented acknowledgement of your instructions. Just like the aviation field, there are limits to how long military personnel can actively be at work for a day. Similar to deployment, most expected workload job assignments are not a surprise. While a one-size-fits-all policy may not work, you should establish clear policies regarding late work and attendance and participation. However, instructors should not view sternness on academic policy as somehow a violation of support of our military. Job workload is a common excuse given by military students. Remaining rigid on requirements is not only fair to the rest of the students, but actually helps that student in the long run in personality concepts like accountability. Finally, if a student receives orders, then you can request paperwork as documentation. Any deployment should always include orders that can be used as documentation. However, if a workload issue is causing students to work 12-hour days and miss class, paperwork may not be created for this type of issue. Also, schedules for exercises are not always published ahead of time. In summary, you can always ask for documentation from your students. Just keep in mind that official documentation may not always be available. Ask your students to always communicate with you as soon as possible in the event that any unexpected issues arise. A military student's rank can affect his or her conduct in class. The lower enlisted students may be reserved and attend military training sessions begrudgingly. In some ways, they may not be able to distinguish a collegiate environment from a military training session. Specific engagement may be necessary to break them of that habit. This will also help in their participation in class because these students typically are not encouraged to speak up at work. Lower enlisted service members may also defer to other high ranks in the class, and even more so if they know that person outside of the classroom. This is particularly of concern when there is an officer in the classroom. Begin your first day of class by asking your students to share a little about themselves. Understanding their background and motivation may be helpful. For example, many military promotions may be contingent upon earning a certain degree. In addition, students may have taken their writing and general education courses many years ago. You may find it helpful to assign a small writing assignment in the first week to assess your students' writing skills, perhaps by asking them to introduce themselves. Also, throughout your class, since students may not speak up, it may be better to select students instead of asking for volunteers. Establish ground rules for communication in your course and remind your students that this is a class and not a military training session. You may also want to use an approach to help students brainstorm the topic so they are better prepared when you call on them to answer a question. Connectivity to the internet in a field location can present some problems. For the most part, installations will have adequate internet for students to be able to complete online assignments. However, those installations in the Middle East or any field training site may have less reliable internet. Students on training sites may have internet access, yet when units go on field exercises, military members are usually on lockdown. Even on their downtime, they may be unable to access a computer or the internet. Students in this situation, however, will likely see this training exercise coming well in advance and so can plan accordingly. Those students at forward operating bases, also known as FOBs, may have legitimate concerns with regards to internet connectivity. These areas are the ones taking the brunt of the fire from enemy combatants. With any situation regarding internet connectivity for military students, it is perfectly acceptable to request documentation briefly describing the situation and status of internet connectivity prior to giving an exception. So far, we have discussed working with active military students. However, it is important to be prepared to teach veteran students as well, as the veteran student population continues to grow. Veteran students are a large population at our university, and they face their own unique challenges. The first challenge veteran students may face is that they may not understand the structure of the university and where they can go for support. Veteran students are used to a very clear chain of command from their military experience, and this may not be the case in a university setting. Secondly, they may find it challenging to reacclimate to civilian life after being in the military. Their role and identity has changed from military personnel to student, and this can be a significant adjustment. Veteran students may also be dealing with service-related injuries, both cognitive and physical. Keep in mind, students are not required to disclose anything to you and should go through Student Disability Services for any official accommodations. There are many ways you can provide support for your veteran students in your course. First, be aware. Understand the unique circumstances that the student is facing. Second, be knowledgeable. Identify the various support services the university offers so you can provide this information to your students as needed. Third, be accommodating. While it is important to have fair and consistent policies in your course, it is also important to recognize when students could use additional support to be successful in your course. And fourth, be proactive. There may be simple ways you can strengthen the learning environment in your course. Perhaps you choose to allow students to use laptops to take notes in class, or you provide accessible office hours for students to reach you with questions. Find ways to identify areas for improvement in your course whenever possible. In conclusion, be accommodating to your students, but keep in mind you can often request documentation to support any military student's request for an exception to your course policy. If you ever have a specific issue, feel free to contact someone from your college for further assistance. In the next section, we'll specifically discuss teaching on a military installation. If you will be teaching on a military installation, you should be aware of not only the requirements and policies of your particular classroom, but also general installation security and rules, as well as traditions and protocols. Visit your classroom prior to your first day of class to understand the layout and available technology. You'll want to exchange contact information with the person in charge of locking up at night, especially if your class is the last one of the evening. Also, make sure to find out when the facilities close and what the lockup procedure is. The campus director will brief you on everything you need to know insofar as accessing the base, your assigned classroom, and lockup procedures, so contact your campus director with any questions or issues regarding your classroom. Keep in mind, often this classroom space is shared with other universities. Be sure to leave the classroom in the condition you find it and protect university equipment. Familiarize yourself with the security of the installation prior to your first class meeting. Make sure you follow any installation rules and all posted signs. Never bring weapons or guests onto the installation. Also, observe all driving rules, including wearing your seatbelt, not using your cell phone while driving, and following all posted speed limits. Do not wander around the installation or use the installation commissaries or shops. You can generally use the eating facilities on the installation, but check with your campus director first. In most places, civilians are prohibited from purchasing gasoline, groceries at the commissary, or items at the post-based Navy exchanges. However, generally food establishments are open to everyone. The campus may close unexpectedly due to weather, security concerns, or military trainings. In these situations, your campus director will contact you as soon as possible to make you aware of the situation. You can also ask your students to let you know as well, but always verify with the campus director. If your campus is closed during your scheduled class meeting, you cannot simply cancel the class. You will need to reschedule the class session. It may be useful to ask your students at the beginning of every term when a good alternate date and time would be, just in case a class session must be rescheduled. It is very important that any student scheduled to take a class on campus attend the session or makeup session in person. Students generally cannot attend the session via Eagle Vision from home as an alternate option. At some installations, the culture is to observe the raising and lowering of the flag. This happens once in the morning and once in the evening. Military personnel will salute, civilians will stand still. At some installations, people stop their cars in the middle of the road and get out and stand facing the flag. A good rule of thumb is to follow other people. Before your first class session, ask your campus director if there are any ceremonies or traditions specific to this particular installation. You can also ask your students to let you know as well. In conclusion, teaching on a military installation will provide unique opportunities for you as the instructor. Familiarize yourself with your classroom as well as the military installation prior to your first class to avoid any unexpected issues. Be sure to use your campus director as a resource for any questions or concerns you may have. In the next section, we'll identify important questions to ask. So far in this teaching unit, we have discussed different issues regarding teaching military students and teaching in a classroom on a military installation. There are still some common questions that you will need to ask your campus director that are specific to the military installation where your classroom is located. The common questions you should ask. Check the hours and policies for installation visitors centers. Also, be sure to contact your campus director in advance of your first class meeting for more information. Each facility's technology is different. Inform the campus director in advance of your needs. Also, test all equipment and websites before the class begins. Contact IT support as necessary. Check to see if you need a parking permit. Also, keep in mind if there are exercises you may need to park farther away from class. Each facility is different. Please familiarize yourself with the facility security. Also, get the phone number for installation police in case of emergency. Be sure to find out the lockup procedures for your building. Also, exchange contact information with the person in charge of locking your building. While these are important and common questions to ask, you most likely will have specific questions to ask as well. Contact your campus director with these questions prior to your first class session. In the next section, we'll discuss important university policies. There are several important university policies regarding teaching military students and teaching on military installations. Each of these policies comes directly from the Policies and Operations Manual for the Worldwide Campus. While this section will introduce each policy, you should review each policy in its entirety as well. You can do so by choosing the Resources button at the top right of the page. The Military Memoranda of Understanding Policy provides guidelines for coordinating modifications or updates to Memoranda of Understanding, or the MOU, to offer education services on individual military installations within the United States. The Accessing Military Installations Policy provides detailed policies and procedures for staff and faculty members accessing military bases and installations. The campus director will be your main point of contact, and you will need to coordinate with them prior to teaching on base. The Conduct on Military Installations Policy will provide you with all of the detailed information for military installation conduct, along with other items from the DoD Memorandum of Understanding. The Military Student Tuition Policy covers policies, procedures, and guidance for acceptance and verification of military students' tuition assistance. Military Student Tuition Discount Policy covers policies, procedures, and guidance for military student tuition discounts. Rather than printing these policies, it is recommended that you bookmark the links as they are subject to change. The web page for each policy will always include the most current information.